Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna say.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of April 17th. And we have two segments today. We're going to have a writer named Michael McColly telling us some wonderful stories about a trip he made. And then a little bit later, we're going to talk jazz for International Jazz Day. So to start us off, we're going to bring Euan Hague, our co-host, on, and he'll handle the first interview, at least at the start. Hello, Euan.
Hey, good morning, and thanks for having me back, Michael. And Michael McColly, it's great to have you on the Life in the Heartland show. Good to have you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. I got in touch with Michael. Two Michaels. I got in touch with Michael McColly because I got his book as a Christmas present. His new book, Walking Chicago's Coast, a 63-mile journey to the Indiana Dunes. And right away, he starts off his epic adventure, a 2-day walk. Starts in Rogers Park, and so I thought I have walked some of those paths, but not as far. So
not too many people have.
No. So what inspired? What inspired you to walk all the way from Rogers Park to Indiana Dunes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's several answers. You know, I was coming back from the UK where I was walking for a whole month. And I just didn't want to stop when I got back. And I know oftentimes at the end of like travel, I get into a little depression. And I said, no, I'm just going to keep going. And I also felt like, you know, you can walk out of London, you can walk out of Edinburgh, and why can't you walk out of Chicago? And so I'm a big walker, and the dunes are a very special place to me, as they are to many, many people. And I just felt like, could I do it, you know? And I just set off. I went, I took a drive just to check where I was going to go. And I know the route. I mean, everyone knows the route, but to go along the lake and go through the south side and then into Whiting, Hammond, East Chicago, and Gary. I mean, that's not the path everybody goes much unless you live in those areas. And I just, the dunes were, a place where I did a lot of hiking. I have suffered from depression. I live with HIV, and several years when I first contracted HIV, I did a lot of hiking in Arizona, Colorado, and at the dunes. And so it's just always been this important place to me. And I kind of wanted to make a pilgrimage there. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't sure whether I would make it, but I gave it a shot, and I did.
and the book is in part memoir, part history of Chicago, part environmental study of the landscape, particularly in northern Indiana. And so I'm sort of wondering, what were some of the places along the way that really gave you something new that you weren't expecting?
Oh, yeah, there's so many places. I mean, I think I recommend to everybody, you walk in a city where you live and it suddenly becomes a whole new place. You think you know where you live, and then you have a different feeling. The history kind of comes out of the land, and certainly going through East Chicago and Gary, I was really awakened to, the degradation. You kind of see it. You're on the expressway and things like that. But going through it, if you walk through BP, I mean, come on, you're going to really feel the fact that your lungs are taking in this pollution and the dust, the dust from the roads and the railroads. I mean, people live around that, all that toxic stuff that has been there for over 100 some years, And I think that was what I really was surprised at. I mean, I know of the area, but I had no idea of just how difficult it is to live around that kind of an environment. One thing, too, is also the beauty. I mean, in Chicago, all these little pockets, there's these beautiful areas, even though it's right next to a Superfund site. All these birds come through, every year. And, near Hammond, there's a great area where birders go. And so there's that, kind of a strangeness of Northwest Indiana and South side of Chicago, where there's all these birds, and there's all this. So it's beautiful too,
Right. Now, and I think that what I was going to say is, as you describe it, you start in Rogers Park, and it's really easy to walk along the lakefront. There's a lake path. You can walk down the beach. But then once you kind of get onto the south side, it becomes much more difficult, and you're walking through neighborhoods. And just that contrast is kind of also written with the history of the city.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, you can't go through this city and not feel the history of the Chicago riots started on the lakefront there, where that young black teenager Eugene Williams was stoned to death, and then the Memorial Day massacre down there near the South Shore in that area, and you just feel, you just feel history. History isn't abstract, it's real, and I think if you take the time to kind of go in there, you begin to really appreciate what's happened here, all the people that have lived here and built this city. So I felt
Michael McColly, I spent a little time down there when there was still an abandoned steel mill.
Oh, and, sure.
I worked in the movie Andy Davis flick called Chain Reaction with Keanu Reeves. And that's where we were turning water into hydrogen in the film.
My God.
And, that's an empty space now. And, I was hoping the Bears, if they were going to build a new stadium, might do it there. Apparently, the governor has plans for AI or something.
Yeah.
Which is too bad.
There's going to be a tech park there, I think. If they get approval, it's a toxic area. I don't know. They're going to have to do
remediation.
But right now it's Steelworkers Park. Tell
our listeners and viewers a little bit about the dunes themselves. I'm thinking back, wasn't it the great Paul Douglas who taught at University of Chicago?
Absolutely.
And a senator? He was the guy responsible for that.
Absolutely. I mean, the dunes are, there's a long history of the struggle to create the national park. There was a big environmental battle there. One of the first ones in the 60s, where Bethlehem Steel and the state of Indiana wanted to build their port. And people said, no, wait a minute, you're taking down the most beautiful and the largest dunes to build this port in Bethlehem Steel. And, Paul Douglas, his famous line is, I wanted to save the world when I was a young man. And towards the end of my life, all I wanted to do is save the dunes. And he was instrumental in trying to, give us a national park. Northwestern had a contract with Bethlehem Steel, and they used that in court to make sure that they got their way. And you don't tell, the board at Northwestern that, because they don't like to hear about it. But they had their hands are dirty.
And that part of the world, when you're traveling, when you're walking through that area, you're talking about the gas stations and the casinos, and such a different commercial landscape as well as industrial landscape.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's, I was traveling in my own city. Mm-hmm. And, you travel around the world and everything looks new. And you walk through East Chicago and it looks new. I mean, because you're on the ground and you got to walk and you got to sit in a White Castle and just look out at the world, and it's interesting. You watch the workers come in and go and see all the trucks go by, and it's a different way. And of course, I stayed my first night at the Majestic Star Casino. It's closed now. That was Trump's early first casino in Indiana. And he's left a trail everywhere he's gone, of course. Mm-hmm. And out there was this huge parking lot because he was going to build a big, 15-story hotel, and he was going to do this and that, and it's just an empty parking lot. Yeah.
You know, I was doing a little research, so to speak, and I came across a guy named Patrick Reardon who wrote the book, The Loop, the L tracks, and that shaped and saved Chicago. But he said, about your book, it's an indictment of the myriad of ways human beings have failed in their stewardship of the natural world, and their stewardship of each other.
Oh,
Any comment on that?
Yeah, I really liked that review. And indeed, you know, I did feel the disconnection, you know, in this city. There's a big divide, as everybody knows. And if you walk it, you feel it. And for me, you know, I grew up in Marion, Indiana, and it's a factory town, and it got lost and left behind by globalization, like Gary and parts of East Chicago and South Chicago. And so I feel that because, you know, the way this city's been built with the expressways, we don't have to bear witness to what's been left behind. And I think that's one thing that I did really feel, you know, sad about, is to see it up close.
Mm-hmm. You know, one more quote about your book from David Shields, who wrote Reality Hunger. He called Walking Chicago's Coast, your book, a rhapsody of grief and appreciation.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, I feel the loss, you know. I mean, growing up in a factory town, I know what happened, you know, and, you know, relatives that worked in factories and things like that. And, you know, my parents were teachers, and, you know, my town, you know, its population halved. And of course, Gary used to be the second biggest city in Indiana. And now it's got less than 70,000. Same way with East Chicago and, you know, in other areas in Northwest Indiana. And so I did feel the sorrow, and you feel the sorrow of the land misused. But also the land is going to survive us, you know, it's going to just do what it needs to do. You know, we'll be gone, and it'll just be like, you know, like George Carlin, he says, it'll just shake us off, you know. But I do feel the grief in the land.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned doing long distance walks in the United Kingdom and other places in the United States. What is it? You do these as a solo, or are you interacting with people along the way? I mean, doing long distance walking, it's increasingly popular as a hobby. Obviously, there's more and more trails. I had a friend, and I know Katie Hogan, often co-host, recently did the Camino in Spain, northern Spain. So this is an increasingly popular hobby for people.
It is. I was on the Camino a few years ago, you know, just as COVID ended and my mother had passed away, and I kind of felt like I needed to do that. And I'm actually going to the UK again in a couple of weeks to do the Coast to Coast Trail. It's become popular, but you know, in England, it was always a pastime, especially for working people, because they lived in Manchester and Liverpool, and you know, I mean, people who you know live in very tight areas, they got out of the city. You know, back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, these walking clubs were very popular, and if you think of the Appalachian Trail, it was created to give workers a place to go to from Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, Baltimore. I mean, people think, oh, the Appalachian Trail was, you know, for special walkers, but it was kind of designed to give people a place to go to that needed to get out of the city. And so was the dunes. It was, you know, it was for workers. But yeah, walking, I love long distance walking. I think it really affects your perception, your sense of your spiritual connection to the land. It's very healthy. And as I said, I've done it for, you know, dealing with depression.
Mm-hmm. Michael, let me ask you, what did you find? What was the most surprising thing on your walk along Chicago's and Indiana coastline?
Well, I think one of the things was I got the feeling, strangely, is that I really began to look at buildings and bridges, and I just had this sense of all of these people that build these things. You know what I mean? I you know that, but I think I felt it. I said, look at all these hands and bodies that built all these buildings, and I just, I gave it lip service. I said, oh, sure. But I had a sense of that. And that was surprising to me. Maybe it was because you could take the time to feel things and see things. The other thing was that I looked in Chicago and I looked at memorials a lot. Like what's the monuments? Who do we memorialize? Because you spend the time and you look at certain memorials and you go, what are these Native people on Congress Avenue doing here? I mean, I've seen it for years, but I began to kind of go, well, why do we have that there? And why do we have a statue of, for Mussolini over here by Soldier Field? And you notice it's got trees all around it. They don't want anyone to know it's right there,
It's still there. I was hoping that one was gone. I remember that.
It was there last time I saw it, but who do we memorialize? I mean, Sheridan. You think of Sheridan Road, and you go, well, Sheridan isn't my hero. He's
down there to mess with the workers.
Well, that's absolutely right. Sheridan Road is there to get those troops in there from Fort Sheridan, and I don't think a lot of people know that. And Sheridan, of course, was instrumental in the biocide of the buffalo too, and I don't know. I just felt history, as I said, a lot more, and that surprised me. I mean, I took that in a lot more than I thought.
Mm-hmm. I got. How about telling us what one thing that was most memorable for you? What?
It was. I got. I got into the national park and. I went up to the rangers, and you have to pay to get into the park, even if you walk. And I went up to them and I said, well, I walked here from Chicago. Does it still cost $1? And they said, yeah. And I said, I really did. And they said, it's $1. And so I put my $1 out there. But I also kind of, met people in Gary that were really kind to me and nice. And, I ate there, and I just, Gary I know people in Gary, and I really like Gary. And I think that's one thing I really hope that city, has a renaissance. It deserves it. Yep. It really does.
The thing that struck me reading the book, and obviously all the history, the memorial to Eugene Williams is probably not 15 or 20 years old. I mean, it's a relatively new installation.
Yeah.
And, I think the city is beginning to recognize its memorial landscape is maybe not what it should be. But I think also the other thing is the way you describe the rivers and the way you describe the beaches and the coastline and stuff, it just reminds you that this is a large marshy wetland that we all live in,
That's it.
And that natural underneath all the buildings and all the concrete is this basically it's a wetland. And I'm saying that thinking about the storms we had recently, and I know my basement is flooded, and so
me too.
Oh yeah,
yes. We live in a place of water.
We do, and we're in trouble a little bit with climate change because some areas in this city, particularly Rogers Park over here where I live on East Lake Terrace, that we had to fill in the beaches, and there's places on the south side where the level of the water can come in very easily with a big, let's say the lake levels rise. The lake levels have come up and they've gone down kind of erratically. And we've got problems. I know in Indiana, Beverly Shores, or Port, or Ogden Dunes, they've had their beaches are eroded, and it's there's some problems because this is a wetland and it absorbed all the lake. It didn't have this, 18 miles of a revetment wall. So I think, but here in Rogers Park, at least we have had this attempt to kind of put marram grass and things to kind of, return a little bit of the dunal landscape thanks to people in Rogers Park. So we've got some remediation to do in the future, I hope.
Michael McColly, author of Walking Chicago's Coast. How about telling the people how they can get the book and give us a hint about what you're working on now?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can get this, in various bookstores across Chicago. And, you go on to my website, michaelmccolly.net. And you can order it from Cornell University Press, or you can Amazon, of course, or maybe bookstore.com. That's the best one because it's going to it's going to independent bookstores. And right now I'm writing about my hometown in Marion. There was a famous, infamous lynching there in 1930. And so I'm writing about that and about my family and some family history of what happened there. So that's what I'm working on right now. Yeah.
And where are you walking to today?
Probably to the community garden where I'm a part of my leadership team in the community garden, and we got a lot of stuff to do out there.
Yeah. It's the season for that. So
it is.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Yes.
Michael McColly, great book. Really enjoyed reading Walking Chicago's Coast. Gave me a lot to think about, and looking forward to learning more about the history of Indiana and this part of the world.
Okay, thanks, Euan. Thanks, Michael.
Right on.